kuongoza katika shughuli ya kufanya changizo, ya kufanya harambee, ili waweze kuwezeshwa kufanya mradi ule ambao utausaidia jamii nzima kwa ujumla, sio kwa leo wala sio kesho wala sio mtondogoo Speaker, lakini kwa siku nyingi zijazo Speaker. Sioni makosa pale kiongozi akifanya mchango ule Speaker. Vile vile Speaker, nikinaya kwamba kuona sheria hii Speaker inampatia mtu binafsi ambaye ni waziri wa serikali kuu na waziri wa serikali ya kaunti nguvu kupita kiasi katika hali hii ya kudhibiti swala lote hili la harambee Speaker. Speaker, tusiwe jumba la kuleta sheria ambayo itatufinya sisi wenyewe kama viongozi Speaker. Lazima tuketi chini, tuulizane shida ipo wapi. Ikiwa tunafanya harambee nyingi kwa sababu ya ugonjwa Speaker, nafikiri serikali hii kwa sasa Speaker, na imekuwa ni juhudi za serikali zilizopita hapo awamu ya kutafuta suluhu ya kuhakikisha kwamba kila Mkenya leo hii anaweza kupata matibabu bila kupitia dhiki ya kuuza mali yake, bila kupitia dhiki ya kufanya harambee zisizopungua Speaker, ili kupata matibabu Speaker. Na nataka nishukuru serikali kwa ule mfumo wake.
What's your point of order, Senator Cheradike? Cheradike, I don't know why you are testing your card on the dispatch box.
No, Madam Speaker, it's not functional, and I wish the new commissioner was around. We would have launched a formal complaint before the new commissioner. Madam Speaker, I'm standing under order, standing order number 105 on accuracy of facts, and also under Article 96 of the Constitution of Kenya. If you had the humble submissions by our brother-in-law as Nandi County, Senator Chimera, Madam Speaker, she has asserted that there are other forces who are forcing the Parliament of Kenya to do legislative interventions. Yet under the Constitution, Madam Speaker, it is our inherent right as legislators. Could he be ruled out of order for implying that we get other orders from even other people, Madam Speaker, so that even your visitors who are on the gallery might imagine that we legislate based on knee-jerk reaction, Madam Speaker? Is it in order?
Before I give you a chance to respond to that point of order, let me do a communication. Honorable Senators, I have a communication from the chair of the Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of a Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, Shisele Tosha, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. The delegation is in the Senate on a courtesy call to Honorable Rachel Ameso Amolo, Commissioner of the Parliamentary Service Commission. In our usual tradition, Honorable Senators, of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit, and I thank you. I want to give this opportunity to the Senator for Kakamega County, Dr. Senator Bonnie Halwale, to welcome this delegation to Senate.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Chair, through you, allow me to welcome the young women from Kolomani and have special words to say thank you to Honorable Rachel Ameso, who is the host of this CBO. Honorable Rachel Ameso, for information, Chair, is one of our commissioners of the Parliamentary Service Commission. Madam Speaker, I'm aware that the commissioner purposes to become the woman MP of Kakamega.
Senator
and
Abbas, is that the normal courtesy you're supposed to use when you're, can you courtesy the speakers?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, and I want to wish her well. Allow me also, as I welcome these great women, to congratulate the MCA of Idaho North, Mama Gladys Mugongolo. I'm sure she's in the delegation. And Madam Speaker, what a coincidence that the name Shisere is in the House today when the hospital that I upgraded from a dispensary to a maternity health center is by the same name, and it was started courtesy to Harambees by Seth Lugonzo. I therefore wish to thank you for coming, and I would like that if you finish quickly, I would like to meet you behind the tent so that thank you, Mr.
Senator
Speaker.
Boni Halwale, that language is not parliamentary. We did not understand what language you used, but we will not use more time. But you are cautioned to use parliamentary language. One understood. Point of order, Senator Wakoli. You may resume your seat. Senator Wakoli.
Honorable Speaker, what my good doctor and bullfighter is saying, that we're extending an olive hand, a hand of welcome, and that we are going to do what we have always done, to guest and honorable people from our community. On behalf of Bungoma, I also welcome my mothers in the House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Wakoli. Senator Chimera, you can proceed to clarify what you meant on the point of order raised by Senator Cherargei.
Asante, Speaker. Nafikiri Senator ndugu yangu kutoka Nandi alikuwa anazungumzia kuhusu ule mshtuko wa goti, kuashiria kwamba tunaleta sheria kwa sababu ya ile hali ya wazungu nikitohoa wanaita knee jerk reaction, Speaker. Nimemaanisha kwamba, sikumaanisha kwamba kuna msukumo kutoka sehemu mbalimbali, lakini ile hali ya kwamba vijana wetu walipiga kelele kuhusu na ile taswira yote ya masuala ya Harambee, na ndipo sasa tunaona sheria hii imefika bungeni leo. Sikusema kwa kukusudia vibaya, Speaker, lakini nilikuwa naweka wazi tu kwamba kuna mchipuko wa ni hali gani ambayo sheria hii imefika bungeni leo hii, Speaker. Kunradhi, naomba kama imeeleweka niweze kuendelea na changizo yangu.
You can proceed.
Asante, Speaker. Speaker, nilikuwa nasema kwanza mimi ninafikiri hapo awali nataka kusema kwamba ninapinga vikali sana sheria hii, Speaker. Kwa sababu ukiangalia kipengele cha 13 1 na 2 kinasema kwamba mtu yoyote yule ambaye ako katika ofisi ya umma kama kiongozi haruhusiwi kujihusisha kamwe na shughuli za Harambee, Speaker. Vile vile pia inasema mtu yoyote yule ambaye anapania kugombania kiti cha umma aidha cha kisiasa, Speaker, pia ndani ya takriban miaka 3 kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu haruhusiwi kufanya Harambee, Speaker. Speaker, ni kinaya kwa sababu shughuli yote ya uongozi, Speaker, ni kusaidia jamii yako. Na mtu asikuelezee kwamba kwa sababu kuna hundi ya CDF ama hundi ya ngaf ama gavana ana fedha ile ambayo inamfikia kule ambayo tumepitisha leo, nafikiri bilioni takriban milioni 387, na nipongeze ile kamati ya mediation kwa kufanya hivyo. Lakini imaanishi kwamba ukiwa na pesa ile ambayo kwa mfano una jukumu la kuleta basari, Speaker, basi uwezi kwenda kwa mfuko wako kibinafsi wewe mwenyewe kusaidia jamii yako. Nafikiri sio uongozi halisi, Speaker. Na vile vile pia sisi wa Pwani tunasema kuna kutoa sadaka kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Ukitoa, Speaker, imaanishi wewe ni tajiri. Kuna msemo unasema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri, Speaker. Ukichanga, Speaker, wewe umeunda sadaka yako kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Kwa sababu kuna maisha ya dunia na maisha ya kule ahera, Speaker. Na sioni haja ya kwa nini tunaweka sheria kumdhibiti kiongozi ambaye kama ndugu yangu senior wangu Mheshimiwa Mungatano, yeye yupo tayari kusaidia watu wa Tana River, Speaker. Na sisemi yeye ni tajiri. Vile vile mimi Senator Chimera nimeteuliwa, nipo tayari kusaidia watu wa Kwale katika changizo zao, Speaker. Iwe ni mchango wa Harambee ya mambo ya afya, iwe ni mchango wa kujenga kanisa, na hata hii weekend inakuja nitakwenda Lungalunga Catholic Church, Speaker, kufanya mchango ambao wamenialika wao wenyewe, kwa sababu mimi nina imani, mimi ni Mkristo Mkatholiki. Nina imani kwamba na Biblia inasema kwamba tukija pamoja Yesu yu ndani yetu, na kwamba ni jukumu langu kama kiongozi kujenga hekalu la Mwenyezi Mungu. Pia nimealikwa vile vile katika Harambee pale Guro kujenga kituo cha afya, ambayo si jukumu langu bispika, lakini mimi ni kiongozi bispika. Siwezi sema siwezi, na sina ile fedha ya kufanya ule mchango bispika. Lakini kuna marafiki ambao wamekwenda shule, ni wafanyabiashara, Mwenyezi Mungu amewabariki na wapo na nia ya kuregesha mkono katika jamii zao. Sio sawa bispika kuleta sheria ya kudhibiti mtu ambaye yuko tayari kutoa. Na nimesema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri. Asante sana bispika, na mimi napinga vikali mswada huu. Shukran na Mungu awabariki bispika.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. Senator Eddie Okech.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to also try and give a few thoughts on this particular bill that has been moved by the majority leader, that essentially this bill seeks to, curb fundraising, if I might, or rather regulate fundraising, if I might put it as simple as such, Madam Speaker. I think one thing I must say, Mr. Speaker, is that the majority leader has been greatly misunderstood. I listened to the minority whip describing the intent of this bill as being able to overly deal with any kind of donations or any kind of charitable deeds, especially when it comes to money. I don't think that that is what the majority leader seeks to cure here, because I don't think that the idea of this bill is to attack, for instance, the charitable organizations that we have in this country, if you may call them also non-profit organizations. I think that what the majority is seeking to cure here is the problems that we have seen in this country of public leaders using the platforms of fundraising as a way of basically capturing the people and as a way of insincerely taking control of public discourse. I think that is a fundamental problem. And Madam Speaker, I think that to that extent, the majority leader is very right. Because, Madam Speaker, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is what I think is the crust of the problem the majority seeks to solve here, Madam Speaker, Article 73, under that Chapter 6, talks about responsibility of leadership. And Madam Speaker, we have seen a lot of lack of responsibility by leadership, where the political leadership, to be specific, has been very irresponsible on issues of fundraising. Madam Speaker, one, the responsibility comes in the form of, the amounts of money that we see going to fundraising are amounts of money that cannot be explained by any means possible by the political class. This is a reality, that the public is getting tired of that kind of behavior. And then number two, we are seeing a pseudo-control whereby when a politician contributes in different platforms or different institutions, then they take control of that institution completely. Now, this is a reality that we must face as a country. This is why the majority leaders come with this particular bill. And that is the reason why I'm taking you back to Article 73 under Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about responsibility of leadership, where it says, under Sub-Article 1, that authority assigned to a state officer, A, is a public trust to be exercised in a manner that is inconsistent with the purposes and objectives of this Constitution, demonstrates respect of the people, brings honor to the nation and dignity of the office, and promotes public confidence in the integrity of the office. Madam Speaker, what has happened in this country is that people have lost public trust in public officers by being led by politicians particularly, and then politicians who are going to do Harambees in different places, Madam Speaker, have also lost respect for the people, Madam Speaker. And also, the acts of Harambees that we are seeing in this country, in the manner in which they are exercised, Madam Speaker, do not bring honor to the nation, and they do not bring integrity and dignity to the offices that we have. What does this mean, Madam Speaker? If you further in that article, sub-article B, it says that authority assigned to a state officer vests in the state officer the responsibility to serve the people, service, rather than the power to rule over them. The political class, because of this Harambe, are ruling over our people. They are not serving our people, Madam Speaker. So this is a problem that is a serious conversation that the majority has brought in this House that then must be addressed. Now, the question is this. Is this the right way to respond to this problem that we are facing in the country? This is what I want to appeal to the majority leader, that this is not the right way to be able to respond to this problem. Because what the majority leader is trying to do here is that is trying to legislate bad behavior. Madam Speaker, you cannot legislate bad behavior by politicians in this country to use platform of fundraising to control the people, to rule over the people, to disrespect the people, to take advantage of the people, Madam Speaker. This bill is basically indicting the EACC, Madam Speaker, because we established a constitutionally allowed institution to deal with the misbehaviors of public officers and state officers under EACC, Madam Speaker. This bill basically tells us that the EACC has completely failed in doing its work. And instead of sponsoring this bill, Madam Speaker, I want to encourage the majority leader that together we can work on rethinking the EACC in terms of the way the EACC can deal with matters of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Because that's where the rot is coming from. You cannot legislate fundraising in this country, Madam Speaker. Because we are people of Kenya and we come from communities, from the family to the community, to the tribe, to the county, and then to the nation, Madam Speaker. We know what fundraising goes to do, Madam Speaker. And for the purpose of this conversation, Madam Speaker, I want to enumerate them. Madam Speaker, we have got 4 fundamental areas where our people find themselves in situations that they did not wish to find themselves in, where then they are forced to fundraise for. The first one, Madam Speaker, is education. Madam Speaker, there are schools in Nyatike sub-county. There are schools in Masangora, in Kuria West sub-county. There are schools in Kuria East, Madam Speaker. There are schools in Rongo, where I come from, that kids sit under the table of their parents to be educated. And when they go to school, they sit under the tree to be educated. What is wrong when that community comes together to sit down, that in the event that the government hasn't built a school there, then they can come together as a community to build those schools, Madam Speaker? What is the problem with that? And are you telling me that today, Madam Speaker, if there are people who have come and they don't come from a family of well-being, then they cannot reach out to their neighbors who are well off in the neighborhood to come and help them build those schools? Madam Speaker, all the schools in this country have been built as a function of fundraising. We cannot kill that, Madam Speaker. On the same education, Madam Speaker, the next problem is the problem of school fee, Madam Speaker. I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that 70% of young people who have passed primary school, Madam Speaker, cannot afford to go to school, despite the fact that we have got CDF to supplement their school fee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I take this time to share with you, and I'm not doing this for the sake of gimmicks. In the year 2005, Madam Speaker, having been adopted by a Kikuyu family in 2004 and lived with 8 families, I was meant to join Friends School Kamusinga in 2006 because I did my exams in 2005. And Madam Speaker, because I could not be able to afford school fee, remember that what we are doing now, the former president, President Kibaki, had tried to do it by executive power. President Kibaki had put an executive order that banned public solicitation of funds in 2004, 2003, Madam Speaker. When I passed to go to Friends School Kamusinga, Madam Speaker, I did not have money. But because the issue of fundraising had been banned by the Kibaki administration, Madam Speaker, it meant that I had to go to the DC to be able to get a form of a pro forma to raise money, Madam Speaker. For 3 months, I could not be able to get the DC to write for me a pro forma to go and solicit funds, Madam Speaker. When I eventually got the pro forma, Madam Speaker, I was only able to raise 800 shillings after 3 months, Madam Speaker. I missed my entire first semester or first term because I could not be able to raise money and I could not be able to go through getting even to the DC's office, Madam Speaker. And I had to join Friends School Kamusinga in second term when all my peers had already gone through a first term, Madam Speaker. And even then, it was through that act of having a pro forma, Madam Speaker, that I met one gentleman called Kennedy Okongo, a lawyer in town, who wrote for me the full check to go to school and be able to be a senator today in this house, Madam Speaker. Then today you are saying that for kids like me who might not have been aggressive enough to get to a DC, now have to go to a cabinet secretary or a CEC in county to get to be financed to get a fundraising document to go and raise money. Where are we going as a country, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, number 2, the area that people are facing a lot of problems in is medical issues, Madam Speaker. It might look simple for people here who have got medical cover to think that medical issues in this country are easy. But Madam Speaker, we have got people in this country who are held as prisoners of hospitals because they cannot be able to pay 30,000 shillings to get out of an hospital, Madam Speaker. So the moment you say that for them to be able to raise money, to leave hospitals, to raise money, to go and get medical attention, Madam Speaker, then they must look for the CEC. They must form a committee. They must look for people who are well off. Madam Speaker, what are we doing to our country? Let us legislate for not the bad manners of politicians. Let EACC do their job, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also have another area here that people just don't understand. The burden of funerals in this country, Madam Speaker. That's another area that me as a political class have faced a lot of requests on, where people, somebody has suffered and died in a hospital. Then they get imprisoned in mortuary, yet they're dead, because their own families cannot be able to afford a fee of 30,000, 10,000 shillings, sometimes as little as 5,000 shillings, Madam Speaker. A family cannot be able to get their person out of a mortuary. What is wrong with that person reaching out to a neighbor or to me, who might be a little bit privileged, to help out and to lend a hand to get this person out of a mortuary, Madam Speaker? These are real issues. They're not stories. They are in our communities, Madam Speaker. Now, I know that the bone of contention that has been there is the issue of church and mosques, Madam Speaker, where the political class have been able to use pulpits and places of mosque to do political campaigns and make it difficult to make sense for nourishment of our people in terms of spirituality, Madam Speaker. Again, I do not support the idea that we can ban fundraising for churches, that we can ban fundraising for mosques, Madam Speaker, because the roles that mosques and churches play in terms of moral compass of our community, Madam Speaker, the value might not be quantifiable, but indeed it's untold in terms of the impact they're having on our community. I think that, Madam Speaker, let the churches self-regulate in terms of controlling the bad manners of some few politicians. And it's not all of them, Madam Speaker. It's some few politicians who have got bad manners of using this platform as a place of bravado and ego setting in terms of their political nourishment instead of their spiritual nourishment, Madam Speaker. But we cannot ban the political class, the public officer, the state officer, the private individual, the corporate individual from raising money to grow churches, to grow mosques, and to grow houses of worship when these places are actually helping to contribute in supplementing the government's effort in terms of building our moral capacity in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you want to build a strong home, you must constantly build 3 things in a human being. That is why, even in creation, there is Holy Trinity. That's why even in creation, we are created in 3. In 3s, Madam Speaker. The first thing you must feed in a human being, Madam Speaker, is the mind of a human being. That's why we have got an education system. But once you fed the mind of a human being, Madam Speaker, there is still no peace if you do not feed the heart of a human being, Madam Speaker. And that is where the churches and the mosques are coming from, Madam Speaker. But a peaceful heart with an educated mind is never peaceful unless you also feed the stomach of this human being, Madam Speaker. That's when you have got a complete human being, Madam Speaker. So any moment you take away any of those segments in the society, you can't make it. We as a government and as a political class can only feed the stomach. Education institutions can only feed the brain. Where do we leave the hearts of our people? It is to the churches and the mosque, and we cannot allow for any law that makes it impossible to build those churches and to build those mosques, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this bill, we have also seen a provision, very fast, Madam Speaker, that says if you want to do fundraising, then you must do it in your family. So what happens to a family where, I come from a family where the first name that has been heard about in this country, Madam Speaker, in our family, in our entire generation, that Arun Cheriot knows is Eddie Okech. Because my grandfather, Kawisa, died long time ago in some village in Nyakune, near Gogo Falls, that nobody knows, meaning it has got an impact on the well-being of my entire community and my entire families. So you are letting me be in a situation where if you want to do for fundraising, I can only do it with my family and not with the family of Mungatana who I now know, who I can invite and tell him, support me here and there. Madam Speaker, this is now discriminating and then making people to be in their own cocoons of successful families, the haves versus have-nots. We cannot allow that in our country, Madam Speaker. And lastly, Madam Speaker, there is the issue of the regulators. You are talking about regulations being done by Cabinet Secretary. Madam Speaker, in law, it looks easy. But in practice, how will this Cabinet Secretary regulate the President in terms of making sure that the President abides by the requirements of this law? It's not possible. The President cannot be regulated by the person that is the supervisor and the boss of. Madam Speaker, at the county level, you are saying in this bill that the CEC, in charge of planning and social development, will regulate fundraising. How will this person regulate the governor, where our governors have got so much ego that you cannot even tell them something in a funeral or in a function? It will mean that some political class will have more powers to even take advantage of fundraising further than some political class that don't have power. Yeah? So it will be a business for the higher political class to actually do what they want with this fundraising thing and leave those people who are smaller to be, in fact, you are giving the most powerful political people a tool to harass their opponents and other people with this bill, Madam Speaker. This is a good and a well-intended bill to cure the problems of our leadership under Article 17 of the Constitution, but it is not a solution. It is legislating a behavior of bad politics, bad manners of politicians that cannot be cured by this bill. Let us sit as a house and come up with a legislation that will help us rethink the entire EACC and make sure that EACC can do its job or disband it and come with a more functional anti-corruption institution that can deal with corrupt leaders. With that, Madam Speaker, I reject this bill in entirety. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Eddie. Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to also join my colleagues that this bill will not help any Kenyan. As you are aware, the spirit of Harambe has been the fundamental cornerstone for this country in terms of development. It's only after CDF and the other funds came in and the country economy improved that people want to change the spirit of brotherhood. The Harambees or the fundraisers have created cohesion in this country. That most of the poor people have really came up. Most of the students that today, most of our professionals went for scholarships outside the country through Harambees. It created, fundraisers and Harambees have created love among the communities. It's only through sharing with the poor that we love one another. Honorable Speaker, we cannot today throw away the brotherhood that Harambees have created. As you're aware, this country, almost 70% is below the poverty line. And they cannot even afford 2 meals in a day. They cannot afford to pay school fees. Initially, the government said there's free education, but we're not seeing any free education here today. You are seeing even the primary kids have been told, go and bring money. Mothers cannot even afford. They even sell chickens and all these things. Honorable Speaker, I have started working with this government way back in the 80s. And by the time I was starting job, the Harambe was actually at the peak. Because there was no school infrastructures. Kids were learning in the school and the trees. At times, the chiefs were being used to go and collect animals or money from within the villages. Of course, sometimes they were using excessive force. There was a bit of corruption. But today, the classroom that I went to, in my class 1, actually was built with Harambe. And therefore, I cannot be able to support today to say that Harambe should be stopped or should be monitored. That cannot work for us. Honorable Speaker, through fundraising, actually many Kenyans have sought medical treatment outside this country. Medical conditions of these days, there's so many people who are sick. The medical services, hospitals actually have so much been commercialized. That somebody stays in an ICU or HDU in 1 night or 2 nights and 3 nights, the cost becomes just unbelievable high. It is through Harambees that we're able to save people, the dead bodies, from mortuaries, because they've been held custody until money is paid back. Honorable Speaker, I will agree that I will say that the corrupt are not the poor people. The corruption comes from the highest echelons. The top guys who are stealing money. The people who have the money. These 80% or 90% of Kenyans cannot even access money. They survive on only Harambees and goodwills of their friends and the next of kins. So if anybody wants to stop corruption through stopping Harambe, I think that's very wrong. What I will say is that those who steal pay more and more Harambe so that this money can come back to the public. If you say there's no Harambe, then those who stole, the corrupt people will keep the money in the banks or even overseas. So I think we will encourage more Harambes. If you will ask me, that we will say so that at least the little they pay back, I think can be able to help the people that they have stolen their money. Honorable Speakers, I think what we are talking about here is kind of pretense, because I was hearing some of my colleagues here talking that Harambe will do this, Harambe is going to create corruption. My friend, corruption is not coming from the grassroots. It comes from the high top and top and to down. Harambe, we know that it is actually starting from the office institutions. So, Honorable Speaker, I think Harambes shall not be controlled. Harambes cannot, if you want somebody to stop corruption, let this House produce, or let's institute a bill that will seriously deal with corrupt people. Like the China, even if it's going to be killing somebody, even if you're going to jail somebody 100 years, so that somebody can be able to face the consequences of his stealing. But Islamic Harambe, just because somebody has stolen and they want to clean his money, will not help with stopping corruption. With those few remarks, I beg to support. I want to oppose the bill.
Thank you, Senator Abbas. Senator William Kipkemoi Kisang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe the intent of the bill originally was not bad, because we had issues in June, and because of the conversation we had at the State of the Nation debate, this bill is as a result of what happened that time, Honorable Speaker. And I want to report to you, Madam Speaker, that some of us went to school because of Harambes. If you get somebody who is 45 years and above, who is in this house, or outside there, Madam Speaker, most schools at that time, there used to be two types of schools. There was schools done by government, and there were some Harambe secondary schools. Most of our public schools now in the rural setup, Madam Speaker, were called Harambe secondary schools. And those Harambe secondary schools, Madam Speaker, some of them even now are national schools, were built by the community. They were built through Harambe, Madam Speaker, by our parents, selling cows, some selling busi, others selling sheep, and all types of things, Madam Speaker, to ensure that the schools are built. Madam Speaker, I hope with the debate that's going on, the little majority is going to think about this bill. Madam Speaker, because we cannot do as a country without an Harambe, Madam Speaker. Most of our judges also, Madam Speaker, were built through Harambees. Some were done by missionaries who came to the country early, maybe 60s, 50s, and 70s, Madam Speaker. And these missionaries also, the resources they got was as a result of Harambees in their own country, Madam Speaker, because they got maybe charity organizations, and those who are philanthropic enough to contribute. And then the resources came to Kenya, came to Africa, and our churches, our mosques were built as a result of Harambe, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my colleagues have talked about school fees. Most people went to school because of Harambe. I remember when I was going to Form 1, I almost missed going to Form 1, Madam Speaker, because my parents didn't have anything. But because of the community, they sat. This is a young boy who did very well, top of his school, and then they decided to contribute. And that time, our school fees was the 1,540, Madam Speaker, and it was not easy to get 1,500 in 1982. So if it was not easy to get 1,500, how about now, when those joining Form 1, they're expected to pay 50, 60,000. So, Madam Speaker, basically what I'm saying is, as a leader, as a legislator, Madam Speaker, we are not going to agree to legislate Harambees in our country, Madam Speaker, because many people will be locked out of school, they'll be locked out of colleges, Madam Speaker. CDF has been there from 2004, but it's not been able to, sponsor all the students across the country. That is why one of the senators the other day, Madam Speaker, said, can we collapse all these bursaries from CDF, bursary from county government, bursary by women reps, and from the ministry, we put in one gitty so that we have really free education from ECD up to university. The only way we can agree, Madam Speaker, to regulate fundraising is if we say completely now from nursery to university, education is completely free, Madam Speaker, so that we know those from less fortunate, less privileged families, Madam Speaker, can have education, which is an equalizer, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the state of health in the country, Madam Speaker, you know, in the village, most of our dispensaries, most of our health centers, Madam Speaker, there is no medicine. And because there's no medicine, you'll realize most of our people who get sick will go to private hospitals in the counties. And when they go even to public, they're expected to pay. And when they're expected to pay and they don't have anything, many of them have lost even their pieces of land because of selling to take the kinsmen and women, Madam Speaker, to the hospital. So basically, what I'm saying, because of medical expenses, Madam Speaker, we'll support Harambees. Because of education, Madam Speaker, we'll support Harambees, Madam Speaker. And because of other issues, Madam Speaker, if you check clause 14, clause 13, Madam Speaker, of the bill, clause 14, Madam Speaker, it says a person shall not conduct a public fundraising bill unless the person has applied for and obtained a permit in accordance with the provisions of this law, Madam Speaker. You can imagine, you have a sick person, the person requires to be discharged because he has gone to the hospital, you need to apply within 14 days. And where will you get this CEC? If we were not able to get a DC who was just within the district, but now this is a CC in charge of a county or a CS in charge of the country, Madam Speaker, it's not possible. And Madam Speaker, one of the clauses here, Madam Speaker, is saying, if you intend to seek for a public office, 3 years before elections, you should not conduct any fundraising, Madam Speaker. How would you know? You know, standing for a seat sometimes is a calling. The community can approach you to stand, and they can approach you 6 months to the election. What will happen if you will have conducted a fundraiser before? It means basically you'll be locked out, and the community will lose a leader would have come to assist the people, Madam Speaker. You check the fines, Madam Speaker, that if you conduct a fundraiser without a valid permit, Madam Speaker, you can pay a fine of 5 million. How will you pay a fine of 5 million when basically you are looking for resources to release somebody from the hospital or to take a child to the hospital, to school, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, basically what I'm saying is when the time comes to vote, Madam Speaker, we are going to reject this bill, and so that we can basically ensure that we continue supporting our people. This is a social call, it's a social rally to ensure that our people are assisted, Madam Speaker. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I oppose this particular bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kisang. I do not see any other senator, and so I'll call upon the mover to reply. Majority Leader, Senator Aaron.
Few days that this bill has been on the floor of the House, listening to colleague senators speak about a very live topic in our country presently. You will recall what has happened the last weekend, Madam Speaker, where for the very first time we are told the Most Reverend Philip Anyolo, though from quarters close to the conversation, I'm told, I've seen the governor of Nairobi saying he's still awaiting his donation back. I saw him say somewhere that when he inquired, because they had said they have returned the donations, he was told that the fundi had already cut the material for the choir, because the donation was for uniform for the choir. Madam Speaker, so these are the challenges. So these are very live conversation even in the country. And I shared yesterday something on my Twitter page. And of course, the know-it-alls that live on that space, Mr. Speaker, because they never accept to be corrected for anything, did not believe what I said. Today, this afternoon, I have tabled the report from the Labor and Social Issues, Social Affairs Committee, where I stated that over 90% of the respondents that sent in memoranda with regards to this bill actually opposed the bill, Madam Speaker. Just like many colleagues here, a good number have opposed. It's almost split evenly in the House. There's those in support of the bill and those that oppose the bill in principle. And I said that we live in an interesting country, Madam Speaker, because if you follow the conversation online, it's like there are two Kenyas. That's what I've realized. There's a Kenyan online, and there is a Kenya, the Republic, where you and I come from the villages, where Senator Mungatana, Senator Elomonen comes from. There are certain conversations which, if you follow in the Twitter and Facebook space, the kind of things that I said there, most of the time, Madam Speaker, don't exist or are not practical in the real world of the villages and the people that we represent in this House. Because for every village that I have visited the last few months since this conversation began, many pastors that have spoken to me, I gave the example of AIC Ziwani, where I was 2 weeks ago. I was somewhere in Kipkelion West, in my own county of Kericho this week. And the pastors continue to tell me, please, Majority Leader, you have a very bad bill that you want to stop Harambees. Like many of the colleagues that have spoken this afternoon, they are entirely, first of all, misinformed. So there are two issues. Number one, there's misinformation generally, because this bill does not ban Harambees. It only stops you and I, public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from presiding over. Otherwise, Harambees are permitted, Mr. Speaker. But second and most importantly, unlike the statements that I see from churches here, I saw from Jackson Olesapit, I saw from the Catholic bishops, telling us that we need to put, that the church actually wants to put a stop on this. But it's not what preachers tell us in the villages where we come from, including in parishes of the Catholic Church. In my own office, even as I hear what is being said by the Catholic bishops here in Nairobi, in my own office in the village, Madam Speaker, or in our counties, many of these members will tell you that they have cards of pending Harambe invitations from the same churches, including Catholic and Anglican, That's why I said it's like there are two worlds in this country. Some space in the air called online, where you're chasing things that are unseen and people compete for attention and applause. Then the real world in the villages where we come from, where people tell us different things. Therefore, as a legislator, Madam Speaker, sometimes it is difficult to know which world to react to, Madam Speaker. Because the kind of instructions and the things that I see being said in the online space, Madam Speaker, and the information, I want to believe that the reason Senator Mungatana spoke the way he spoke about this particular bill, perhaps that is a brief that he has from the people he represented in this house, the men and women from Tana River who voted for him. And they are saying, Senator, this is what we expect. But I'm sure you are also bombarded by messages and Twitter conversations, or people telling you, stop this. We don't want it to exist. So, Madam Speaker, our work as legislators is increasingly becoming difficult. If you are not careful as a legislator, and I warned colleagues of ours sometimes back here, that you can easily chase air in the names of TikTok likes and followership online and miss the real conversation sometimes that happen back in the villages. Because at the end of the day, a legislator is a representative of the people, and you must find ways in which you capture the views of the people on whose behalf you vote in this house, Madam Speaker. And that includes those that are in the online space and those that are offline, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I have listened to the comments of colleagues about this bill, very interesting, some proposing a total rejection, some proposing, like Senator Ledama, that don't just ban Harambees, look also into charitable organizations that run one or two charity activities in the country to ensure that they do this in strict compliance with our laws, Madam Speaker, that you ensure that in the contributions that they receive from donors abroad, Madam Speaker, the same is actually shared for the intended purpose of those who are making those donations. To those, Madam Speaker, that agree that we need to stop members of the public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from participating in fundraisers for the sole reason that it is one of the avenues through which we can demonetize our politics and reduce the influence of money in our politics, which, like the good Bible says, Madam Speaker, money is the root, actually, to evil. And many times when money is not prudently used, Madam Speaker, it can be used for bad things in our society. Therefore, Madam Speaker, my proposal will be that in such a time as this, where you have a report of the bill, you have members who have a divided opinion, before eventually putting this to a vote, it will be good to consult further and listen if, Madam Speaker, whether there is a way that the bill can be enriched, Madam Speaker, or do we lose the overall intention? Because there are those that have taken issue, for example, with the fact that you are proposing committees through which you can not per se regulate, but a reporting mechanism where the CEC in our counties and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Madam Speaker, can receive reports of some of these public fundraising appeals, Madam Speaker. And this is important, Senator Mungatana. I wouldn't wish that we lose that even in this conversation. Because how many times have you been invited to fundraisings where months later, if you try to go and check whether that money was actually used for the intended purpose, you cannot establish whether that happened or not. And therefore, there was a proposal. Maybe the mechanism that has been proposed needs to be refined. It is at this time that many people are beginning to speak on this topic and say, give us more time to make our contribution. Maybe, with leave of your office, Madam Speaker, it will be an opportune time to provide additional time for people to either think through and share their amendments before eventually taking a vote on this bill, Madam Speaker, including calling for submissions from members of the public. I said this yesterday on my tweet, and this is the accurate information. The report that is before the House bears me witness that there is no religious organization that sent in a memorandum on this bill. And that is quite curious, because I see people speaking very strongly. I expected to see the Catholic Church, I expected to see the Anglican, at least the two of them that have spoken publicly in support of this bill, Madam Speaker, to send in memorandum in support, Madam Speaker. There are also others that have spoken in opposition to the bill. At least it will have enriched our work as legislators, Madam Speaker, to benefit from their perspective, Madam Speaker. Therefore, this is an interesting conversation that the country needs to have with itself before the conclusion and the final determination of what to do with this particular bill, Madam Speaker. And therefore, as Majority Leader, I will be writing to the Speaker, seeking for additional time for first, consideration of additional views, and second and most importantly, to give legislators time to reflect and perhaps seek more opinion from your own people. Senator Mungatana, it will be good for you to ask the people in Tana River, including the young people that perhaps at the time where this conversation began, let's not lose track of history. This conversation began at the height of the so-called Gen Z protests, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure there were young people in Tana River who spoke and said, yeah, we don't want politicians in our churches, we don't want to see them make donations, and so on and so forth. It will be important to listen to them over this weekend, especially as they speak in a large gathering at your village back in Garsen, you know, Mr. Speaker, so that they speak, Madam Speaker, sorry, so that they speak and instruct you in the presence of the rest of the voters, and they can hear what the feedback from the rest of the voters will be before you eventually cast your vote, Madam Speaker. Because at the end of it, Madam Speaker, this conversation is about trying to reduce the influence of money in our politics, Madam Speaker. And let's not pretend here. Harambees form part and parcel of our body politic, and the kind of contributions that people make eventually has an influence in the determination, Madam Speaker, of whether to vote for a candidate or not. It may not be the only determinant, but many of the times, Madam Speaker, it has been used as a yardstick to gauge your abilities and your prowess, Madam Speaker, in terms of marshalling resources, and people use it even as a determinant. Madam Speaker, if you are not careful, and if you do not put a check on this space of fundraisers, Madam Speaker, in another 2 or 3 cycles of Parliament, you will have these houses filled up with wash-wash characters, Madam Speaker, because increasingly it is becoming difficult, Madam Speaker, even to campaign on issues. How many times do these members of this House go out to campaign, Madam Speaker, and before you address a gathering, people don't want to listen. They tell you, we've had those stories before. They're already queuing and saying, just finish with us. We know what we will do at the ballot, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we will have to be intentional. And it's not just by way of fundraisers, Madam Speaker. It includes the overall influence of money as a mobilizing tool, as a determining factor in who gets elected into Parliament and positions of leadership, Madam Speaker. We have campaign financing laws, but how effective are they, Madam Speaker? You remember when you were running for last election, we were supposed by law, Senator Mungatana, to open an account, you know, through which you channel your public, your campaign finances, you know, and manage it, then file returns to IBC. How many politicians observed that, Madam Speaker? So until there's intention on us as a legislature, Madam Speaker, to show that we are going out of our way to reduce the influence of money in our politics, then it will be difficult, Madam Speaker, for us to fight corruption, the biggest evil that our society continues to hoggle and fight about, Madam Speaker. And you know, this is not just about us as a political class. In fact, many of the beneficiaries of corrupt practices, though people imagine that it is we in the political class, it is actually those that are in public offices that are not necessarily political appointees, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who run tenders, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who do many of these so-called government projects. Perhaps what eventually gets to the political class is a fraction, and a very small fraction, as compared to what remains with the rest of. Take time to reflect before eventually taking a vote on this issue. I have noted and I have said that there are members who have raised serious concerns about how to address certain issues. I will be notifying the Speaker. Luckily, I have Standing Order number 66.3 that allows the request for putting of a question until a later date. In the intervening period, Madam Speaker, we could take that opportunity to either consult further and make listening to more memorandum from members of the public with regards to this particular bill. I will inform the Speaker of this request by way of a letter so that perhaps we can make an eventual decision actually on this particular issue. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply and request that in accordance to Standing Order number 66.3, we defer the putting of a question until a later date when all these other things that I've mentioned have happened. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Majority Leader. That request is granted. We defer the putting of the question, and you can dispatch that communication to the Speaker's office on the request to receive more memorandum and views on this bill. I will now reorganize the order paper and call out and request the clerk to call out order number 16.
Order number 16, the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, second reading.
Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, be now read a second time. This is an important bill, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to appreciate what this Senate has done the last few weeks, especially with regards to our brothers and sisters that serve in our constituent assemblies in the counties. You remember, Madam Speaker, that we have already passed legislation in this House that grants financial autonomy to our county assemblies, and that bill is presently on its way to the National Assembly for consideration. One of the biggest requests and asks that actually the county assemblies have made to this House as an elder brother in the devolution family to ensure that we grant them the freedom with which they do, Madam Speaker, their responsibilities. Second and most importantly, Madam Speaker, is looking generally into the welfare of members of county assembly. Madam Speaker, you know at the beginning of this term, the kind of conversation that we had about salaries of members of county assembly, where SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, drastically reduced remuneration for members of our county assembly and put it at a figure that perhaps shocked the country, especially those that know what service in public offices, especially elected officials, have to go through. And it left many of our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, in very difficult financial situations. And you know, Madam Speaker, I don't know whether that has contributed to the many wrangles that we continue to see in our county assemblies with the executive. In fact, in my 3 terms of being a senator, Madam Speaker, I have never seen a time where there is extreme wrangles between county assemblies and the executive as this particular time, Madam Speaker. And there are many reasons. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But I highly suspect that the fact that the welfare of members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, hasn't been sufficiently addressed since the onset of devolution, Madam Speaker, has a thing or two to do with it. You know, members of a county assembly look at those that serve in the first term, Madam Speaker. If you find that your predecessor MCA who served before you, when salaries were better and there were more consistent flow of money to our county governments, Madam Speaker, ever since they left office, are living in raw abject poverty, Madam Speaker. Chances are, during your time of service, you will also be planning, because every politician lives with the practical reality of knowing that one day there will be a former something. It may be at the next election, the next or the subsequent one, they may survive it, but one day, one time, they will cease holding the power and the influence of public office, Madam Speaker, and therefore they need to be assured of their future, especially knowing the very fact that in this country, once you have served as an elected official, it's extremely difficult for you to secure employment elsewhere. Very few people will trust you. If you appear before an interview panel and you say, oh, I was a member of parliament previously, chances are very high that they will actually reject your request for employment, Madam Speaker. Then this passes and holds true from MCA all the way to members of parliament. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is not waste of valuable legislative time to be processing this bill with regards to pension, actually, of our members of county assemblies, Madam Speaker. The principal object of this bill actually is to establish the county assemblies pension scheme, which is for all members of our county assemblies, and to provide for establishment of the scheme's board of trustees and provide for the scheme's management and administration. The bill proposes to have the scheme offer lump sum payments as provident, periodic payments as pension and income drawdowns. The proposed scheme will transition all members of the county assembly into one universal scheme for all 47 county governments, besides being open to other public officers and any other person that may be approved by this particular board. Madam Speaker, eventually when the devolution committee return their verdict on this particular bill, because earlier on I asked Senator Abbas, who's the chairperson of this committee, and I've had opportunity to listen to County Assemblies Forum, Madam Speaker, who shared their views and input on this particular bill. It will actually be important to note what their contributions will have been, how they intend the bill to be improved, but this is the basis upon which we are beginning this conversation on the need to ensure that members of our county assemblies, just like we that serve in the national legislature, have some form of pension, Madam Speaker. And let it be known, because I know how the Kenyan media operates, I would not be shocked if tomorrow morning I wake up to a screaming headline and says, oh, Majority Leader moves a bill to give pension to members of a county assembly. Then people will begin the usual conversation that is most of the time misinformed in our public spaces, Madam Speaker. This is not about raiding the public coffers. It is about setting up a pension scheme that perhaps, and just like ours, Madam Speaker, will be contributory. We deducted monies actually during our time of service here in this house, Madam Speaker, and eventually when you retire and you get to the proper age, Madam Speaker, you earn pension depending on how much you've contributed over the years. And that's why the members that have served longer, Madam Speaker, enjoy more resources, because it is actually a contributory scheme and not a raid on the public coffers, Madam Speaker, as many would imagine. The establishment of this scheme is paramount, as it will provide financial security, Madam Speaker, for members of the county assembly upon retiring and ensuring that they transition out of service with dignity and stability. I've explained, Madam Speaker, how we undermine devolution by having people serve in offices where they know that my only usefulness to this society is when I'm in office. And therefore, sometimes, even in their decision making, the fact that you have no guaranteed security in the future, people tend to make decisions that are short-sighted because they have no absolute plan, but plan for the future. But if you are certain, Madam Speaker, that there is already a scheme set out for you, Madam Speaker, where in future, once you retire or once you exit, Madam Speaker, from that particular office, Madam Speaker, there is a decent salary that can keep you going. How many times do you meet former members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, who struggle even with basic things as basic as school fees and even food to eat, Madam Speaker? My phone is full of messages from people that I know from across the country who previously served as either councillors or members of a county assembly. They gave service to this country, Madam Speaker, but we haven't organized ourselves in a way that you equally enjoy pension once your days here are done or in public service. Without a pension scheme, members and staff of our county assemblies face challenges in meeting their needs, leading to financial vulnerability. Therefore, this bill actually establishes the county assembly pension scheme, which will cushion members of our county assemblies from financial strain post-retirement. For this reason, the importance of this bill, Madam Speaker, can never be gainsaid. There are various parts of the bill, Part 1 to Part 5. Part 1 of the bill, which compromises Clause 1 to 5, contains the preliminary matters, which is a title, interpretation of terms, applicable clauses, Madam Speaker, and institution, organization, or state officer who shall join, and the scope of the bill, which is to the extent and range of those who may access services of this particular scheme. Part 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, it comprises clause 6 to 21, which provides for establishment of the scheme. It establishes the County Retirement Scheme Fund and its Board of Trustees, which provides the procedure for appointment of the trustees and the necessary qualifications. We don't want anybody, Madam Speaker, just any person that has the opportunity to arise and claim, Madam Speaker, that they should be allowed the chance to run these schemes. We need people that are qualified. So it provides that the trustees function and the powers and set the tenures to 3 years, renewable once based on their performance, Madam Speaker. Part 3 of the bill, it comprises clause 22 to 37, contains the provisions on the administration of the scheme and provide for the appointment of the fund managers and the custodian. It also sets out their function. The functions of the administrator, who is the CEO, are also set out. Further, the part provides for membership of the scheme without a sponsor, thus vesting of benefits and withdrawal from the retirement savings account and retirement from the service, among others. It sets out the prohibited payments from the scheme, the usual statutory requirements of any pension scheme. For those that follow how pension schemes operate, Madam Speaker, this is nothing new. Part 4 of the bill, which is clause 38 to 44, Madam Speaker, it provides for establishment of and management of the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Fund, which contains financial provision. It provides for how surplus funds may be invested, as well as set out the requirements for the board to have a reserve account, Madam Speaker. A basic provision to ensure that for whatever reason, when members call upon the opportunity to draw from these funds, Madam Speaker, they have something that secures their future. You know, it's important, Madam Speaker, to ensure that our members of County Assembly actually, just like the rest of all of us that work in one place or the other, have financial stability upon their retirement. You know, Madam Speaker, it is not, oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I have noted the change. I was pretty much surprised addressing Madam Speaker only to notice she was behind me walking by. Mr. Speaker, it is assumed what is a contribution to poverty, Madam Speaker, where when they say poverty is a vicious cycle, Mr. Speaker, how many times actually people contribute to their own poverty by ensuring that they don't join any sort of a pension scheme, and eventually upon their retirement, they have to rely on members of the public or members of their family to sustain their life. And this should be actually the way. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can get to a point where all public servants, and not just us members of parliament, actually make contributions away from the national scheme of the NSSF. I know every employed adult in the Republic contribute to the National Social Security Fund, Mr. Speaker. But over and above, there are many other pension schemes that people contribute to and hope that in their retirement in future they can draw from. It's my hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can have all our public servants actually have a fund set out for them, so that you don't have to go through what public servants go through, like police and teachers, by queuing at Bima House, Madam Speaker, for you to get your file approved. And most of the time, this is money that has been deducted from them. That I know we have combined that particular space with the setup of the, I think, public servant super, there's something, a very big, some institution has a very big confusing name thereabout, but I don't know how practical it is. That's not what we are proposing for the MCAs. This is just one purely for members of our county assembly. Part 5 of the bill, which is clause 45 to 53, it sets out the general provisions, including the duty of care of the board, protection of trustees and employees of the scheme from personal liabilities, offenses, penalty clauses, the usual conversations about how to manage a scheme and how they conduct their business. So I wish to state that this is a very important bill, and I urge members of the Senate to support Mr. Speaker, so that our brothers and sisters in our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, can have a more reliable pension scheme system, and upon their retirement from public office, Mr. Speaker, they live decent life like they lived during the days as they toiled and served members of the public. With those very many remarks, I beg to move and request the Senator for Tana River, Senator Danson Buya Mungatana, to second this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mungatana. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, I want to really thank the Honorable Heriot, our majority leader, for moving this bill in a very eloquent way and expressing how important this bill is. Mr. Speaker, I think I'm one of the older members in this House. And Mr. Speaker, part of my political journey, I served the Republic of Kenya as elected member of Garsen. And Mr. Speaker, thereafter, I was out of office because I stood unsuccessfully twice for the position of governor of Tana River County. And later on, I came back to this House. The people of Tana River brought me to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I can speak with authority what it means to be in office and what it means to be out of office. I'm not telling stories, Mr. Speaker. I'm telling you the truth that from my personal experience, if it wasn't for the fact that, Mr. Speaker, I had run a law firm, that law firm was the one that sustained me, Mr. Speaker, for 10 years and continues to do so to date. Mr. Speaker, there are colleagues we served with in that parliament. And when they left, like majority leader said, they could not find employment. And Mr. Speaker, what is provided for, even in our scheme, as senators and members of parliament, is if you have served for 2 terms consecutively. So if you haven't, and you did only 1 term, you have a problem. And if you have, but also you didn't make much contribution, you have a problem. And if you have, but you don't have another source of income, you have a problem. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm talking about is real. We need to support members of county assembly who serve and they finish their term and are not re-elected by the people back to office. Mr. Speaker, it is real that when you are out of office, you face the reality that you cannot be employed. You have to have your own self-employment. You have to have your own business. And Mr. Speaker, a lot of our members of county assembly, they finish their term, they are not re-elected back, and they do not have businesses, Mr. Speaker. They do not have professional training. They are not engineers, they are not lawyers, they are not doctors. So they don't have something to fall back to in terms of their sustainable income. So, Mr. Speaker, it has been a problem. Back in Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, old members of the County Assembly of Tana River County, old members of the former Tana River County Council, when you meet them, Mr. Speaker, you feel bad because you want to help, but you can only do so much. Mr. Speaker, this bill is critical this bill must be supported by the people of Kenya and by the Senate. Mr. Speaker, why I say so? People who have given service to this nation, people who have taken their time, some even left their careers to come and offer service to the people who elected them. And then after that, you find difficulties in going back to your career. And it's practical, and I keep going back to this, that after having served 10 years as a member of parliament, you go back to your practice and you find your old clients have moved on. Because when you took up public office, you didn't have time to give them all the attention they required. So they have moved on to other practitioners of the law. And if you're an engineer or you're a consultant in a certain field, say economics, if you left the House of Parliament, National Assembly, County Assembly, or the Senate, and you go back, you will find your clients have left. So, Mr. Speaker, it is like beginning afresh. You will find you are competing with much younger people who have gone into the field. So there is need for us to plan ahead for our members of the County Assembly. There is need for us to give them dignity when they retire from active politics or when they lose their position as members of County Assembly. Mr. Speaker, for members of Parliament, we have done something, and many members of County Assembly have asked this question. What about us? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is a good law that we have brought before this House, that people will now know that when they are in these positions, they'll be saving some money, and when they retire, that money is deducted from their salaries, and when they retire, that money becomes available for them for purposes of their existence, even as they supplement whatever other business they do. Mr. Speaker, this is critical because our retired councillors, Mr. Speaker, many of them, and I know of one particular one, who had a home, who was married. When the term got finished, he stayed with his wife. Financial difficulties came. They separated. He could not manage his family affairs anymore. And Mr. Speaker, even the house that he had built, he had to sell it to somebody else. This man, Mr. Speaker, started living at the mercy of brothers and sisters who will use, at some point, look upon him as their leader. So, Mr. Speaker, we need this kind of planning for our members of County Assembly. We do not want them to be in the position that the former councillors have been subjected to. We do not want them to be in a position like former members of Parliament before we had our Provident scheme that have also been subjected to. Mr. Speaker, serving the public is serving the public. Whether you are a member of the County Assembly, you are a member of the National Assembly, or you are a member of the Senate, or even you are elected as governor, or you are elected as a president. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the law that we formulated for presidents and former presidents, you would see that a president who is a retired president continues to draw 75% of the salary that he used to earn when in active service. So whichever way you look at it, that man or woman would be entitled to a decent life when they retire. When you come to members of County Assembly, Mr. Speaker, that has not been looked at all. When you come to members of the National Assembly and the Senate, Mr. Speaker, the amounts are not comparable to what the presidents, former presidents are getting. So, Mr. Speaker, because all these categories of public servants are doing the same work, they are serving the public, it is good for them to have a decent retirement package. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the formulation of this law, you would see that they have created the trustees who are supposed to manage all the 47 counties. The money is going to be in one place. And trustees are going to be chosen. The qualifications have been given, good qualifications. But, Mr. Speaker, in this country, we've had problems and problems and problems when it comes to funds. Anything you see written a fund, CDF, Constituency Development Fund. When you hear lab trust, fund. When you hear anything that is ending up with one word called fund, Mr. Speaker, there are problems. There are problems because the structures of our laws seem to be copy and paste. New ideas are not being put to create checks and balances. Mr. Speaker, even in SACCOs, you will see the same problem. When you hear something SACCO, unless there is good management there, you have a problem. In fact, there are some people who think that once a SACCO is established, they will try to get into management so that they can misappropriate funds. They will try to get into a cooperative so that they can misappropriate funds. They will try even to get into this so that they can misappropriate these funds from MCS. So I would want MCAs who are all listening to me and the umbrella organization for members of county assembly. This law is available for you to study and look at. We would want to hear, when we go into public participation, we want to hear a lot from all the 47 counties. How do we tighten the bolts and nuts? How do we make it impossible for someone with ill intention from getting money from your fund? How do we manage this asset that we are creating? Because all of you are going to be deducted and this money is going to be in one place. The temptation for the devil is going to be high because the money will be a lot. And the truth of the matter is, if this law is not tightened, if this law is going to be like other laws, then we are going into a very, very rough ride. You have seen a lot of people complaining that we are not getting our pension on time. We are not getting our money on time. We have this and that and that and the other. Or my father has passed away. He was a member of this fund. He has not gotten anything. Or it's my wife who has gone. Or it is my husband. And Mr. Speaker, I am asking and I am appealing to members of the county assembly to really take time. If I were you listening to Senator Mgatana here today, I would quickly run to the umbrella organization and ask for a meeting that would authorize the hiring of lawyers to just look at how you can improve this law so that this money that is coming in, this fund that you are creating, nobody is going to play around with it. And Mr. Speaker, I think time has come, and maybe time is now, that people like the administrator, who is the CEO of this fund, they must also put a bond, put a property, or put some cash in an account, that if money goes missing, then this fund will have a lien on the money that you have put as a bond. Mr. Speaker, it is not an outrageous requirement. It happens. Most people who are living on rental properties, and we used to live in rental properties, Mr. Speaker, when you go into a house, you pay a deposit. And that deposit says, in the event that the house is in disrepair, I will access that money to put that house in a correct manner so that the next person who is taking over the responsibility of tenantship would be entering a house which doesn't have dents, the doors are broken, the toilets is leaking, and so forth, the taps aren't working. So we need to have serious CEOs, people who are going to be vetted not just by EACC and so on, not just a certificate of good conduct, but people who would even put their own property. They are willing to put down a title deed that is going to stand as a lien, Mr. Speaker. They are willing to put down cash bond inside a bank. If money is misappropriated, that fund can access that fund, the bond, the security bond, immediately to recover. So that, Mr. Speaker, we have people who are serious about the jobs they are given. And if possible, Mr. Speaker, very serious jail terms should be discussed on these people who are taking responsibility, the administrator and the entire structure. And I'm urging the members of the County Assembly to really take time, because there's a way that we can enrich this law. Let us not say, excellent, we now are creating a fund that will help us to survive when we get out of office, and then we leave it there. You will be the first person who would be crying there in the streets if you go there and you find your money has been eaten and the person is still sitting there, there's no fund, or they deliberately misinvested. Mr. Speaker, billions of shillings are going to be raised in this fund. We need to have duty of care, and the duty of care must be exercised at a very high level. So that, Mr. Speaker, we do not want this fund, Mr. Speaker, all the money that they are collecting, you hear they have put it in some long-term investment. And when the money is required to start sorting out the people who need it, the retirees, there is no money to give to them. So, Mr. Speaker, personally, as I second this bill, I am asking members of the County Assembly, we are passing this law for you. And I know speakers, 47 speakers, somewhere, some of you are listening to me. Some MCAs are listening to me. We are passing this law because for many years, every time since I was elected here as a member of the Senate, we have seen a lot of delegations from County Assembly, people discussing the point that when we finish here, what happens to us? Now the law is with you. Don't sit there and the law is passed and it is not satisfactory, and then you are the first person to complain. I'm asking that this law be improved so that it can encompass in it IT, you know. A lot of payments nowadays, Mr. Speaker, are done through M-Pesa. They are done through bank transfers and so on. And many of the MCAs would be able to transact easily if these provisions are made inside here, so that you do not have to come all the way from Tana River to come and collect your pension in Nairobi. Because this fund, because it is going to be for all the 47 counties, it's going to be operationalized from Nairobi. So you don't want a law that allows for you to travel. If you are from Garissa, you are from Isiolo, you are traveling all the way, you are coming all the way to Nairobi just to come and collect a few shillings. So this law, I believe, if it is improved, it will serve the purpose for which it was created. Mr. Speaker, as I come to finish my submissions, I want to state that when you look at the provisions which are at the end of this bill that we are creating, these are called the saving and transition provision. Mr. Speaker, it is proposing that the members and staff of county assemblies who are members of the local authorities provident fund and the lap trusts umbrella retirement fund shall be transitioned into the scheme within 6 months upon the commencement of this act. Mr. Speaker, right now we have left the National Hospital Insurance Fund, HIF, and Kenya is transitioning to SHIF and to SHA. Mr. Speaker, there has been a lot of uncertainties. Why? Because when we were writing the law, the savings and transition provisions were not clear. And Mr. Speaker, it's not enough to just say within 6 months you will be automatic members of the other side. What happens to those contributions within that period of time? Mr. Speaker, what happens to the people who are working in the other provident funds? Are they going to be absorbed? Is it correct to just leave it so wide? Because this whole section, this whole part on savings and transition is only 3 clauses. I am inviting, again, the eventual consumer of this law. These are the county assemblies, the county assembly forum, to look at what are the proper transition clauses that you can put in here. And if you're listening to me, it would be very useful to have clarity on every issue surrounding the provident funds which you are already serving in. For example, there's a clause here I think should be obvious, that the places where you are, the provident funds where you are already serving, they should produce statements within these 6 months. And these statements should be transitioned. Automatic operationalization of your accounts should be transitioned. If new accounts are being created, what is the process? Can these accounts be linked to your phone number? How are we going? You know, it should be that detailed so that you don't have problems. We don't have people like now we are hearing, oh, NHIS was like this, SHIF and SHAF. You know, we don't want this kind of untidiness when we are transitioning from existing provident funds to to this new one, which is going to accommodate everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, I second this bill very strongly, and I believe it is a way of helping the many members of the county assembly who have served in this republic and in Tana River County, so that, Mr. Speaker, when their term is over, they are able to live a decent life. I fully support this bill, and I'm urging every colleague who will stand, because we are the senior brothers in the devolution family, and because we are the ones who are working with our brothers in the county assembly, and because we care and we have seen what they have gone through, Mr. Speaker, I urge that every senator will speak to this bill, will support it. Mr. Speaker, I urge that all of us will speak with one voice. If there's any divergent opinion, it should be to add to this bill. And I pray that at the time of moving amendments, we shall have very close collaboration with the County Assembly Forum. And they will invite their lawyers so that we can do a very thorough job. It should not be a law that is copy and paste. We shouldn't just look at what other provident funds are doing and then we just copy paste, because we do not want to apply our minds in it. So, Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, I want to say that I fully support this bill and I beg to second. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, be now read a second time. Honorable members, I notice that we have members ready to contribute to this bill, and it's open for debate. I'll invite Senator Beatrice Ogola Akinyi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I sincerely want to thank the mover of the bill, the majority leader, the Senator of Kericho County, Senator Aaron Cheriot. Honorable Speaker, of all the bills that the majority leader has moved, I think this one stands out. For me particularly, Honorable Speaker, probably because of background that I carry into the Senate. And Honorable Speaker, having worked at the county government and having worked as a CEC for a number of years and having worked closely with the County Assembly of Homa Bay, which represents all the assemblies that we have in the 47 county governments, Honorable Speaker, I have a first-hand experience with the lives and the livelihood of the honorable members of County Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I served as a CEC and of course was oversighted by my committees in the County Assembly, and I had an everyday working relationship with the members of the County Assembly. The County Assemblies, Honorable Speaker, are real core stakes of the devolution family. The county assemblies perform the primary oversight of all the works and all the funds, Honorable Speaker, that are given to the county governments. And Honorable Speaker, it is worth noting that as a Senate, we cannot struggle, Honorable Speaker, to give over 385 billion to county governments, Honorable Speaker, and then the houses that oversight this money by county assemblies, as stated, we really would not be concerned about their lives after they are through with their work, Honorable Speaker. It is based on that I rise to support the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill 2024. Honorable Speaker, these are parliamentarians at the county level. They are the first-line legislators that are more closer to our people at the counties. In the wards, Honorable Speaker, they live daily with members of the public. They are able to sort most of their problems, Honorable Speaker. They are able to listen to all the challenges that our people have, ranging from social challenges, Honorable Speaker, to economic challenges that our people have, and all of us as representatives of the people, we know most of the problems that the members of the county assemblies deal with. But above all, Honorable Speaker, members of the county assemblies have their lives. They have families, Honorable Speaker. They have children to look up to. They have their own children, but above that, in the African setup, it looks like every other person becomes your child when you're a leader. They deal with the normal problems that other families deal with, ranging from school fees to so many commitments that we have in our communities, to sickness, to deaths that are all over in our communities, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just as the bill states, this bill is for the social security of the members of the county assembly, of course, from their savings, made from their savings, from all the years they will have served as members of the county assemblies. And so it is important that we get a bill, that addresses the management of this fund, Honorable Speaker. I support this because in the bill sets out rules and regulations for the scheme. And this is important, Honorable Speaker, because these regulations and rules will protect the benefits of these members. Honorable Speaker, there are other benefits that are run in county assemblies. I remember in the Homa Bay County Assembly that I come from, there was a hue and cry from some staff when one term was over. And these members of staff, Honorable Speaker, are people who were working on contract of 5 years. They had been instructed about certain savings they were making. And when the term ended, Honorable Speaker, they knew there were some benefits that were accrued to them. Honorable Speaker, for a long time, when the term began, these members of staff of the Homa Bay County Assembly were chasing these benefits. And Honorable Speaker, when you have planned with some money, when the year begins, you know you are going to get some money, and this money was not coming forth, Honorable Speaker. And that is why I support this bill, because the rules and regulations are directly spelled out. And Honorable Speaker, this is going to enhance the management of this fund. Honorable Speaker, as I've said, the members of the County Assembly are closer to our people. And so there's a need for some saving for them, because the lifespan of a politician, Honorable Speaker, sometimes is never very clear. And as the mover of the motion says, one time you are here, the next time you may not know the environment in which you are going to operate. Honorable Speaker, even as I stand here, I'm a nominated senator. I'm looking forward to be elected in a post in the next election. Honorable Speaker, what happens if that does not happen? It is based on those misgivings, Honorable Speaker, that we as a Senate that looks at the interests of the county, it would be important that we establish a pension scheme that will take care of any eventuality of all members of the County Assembly. Honorable Speaker, we have worked with these members, and we have seen the lives that some of them are leading when they lose their seats after every 5 years. I can testify to you, Honorable Speaker, that having worked with at the first term of devolution, and when that term ended, I can testify in this house that I saw some honorable members of the County Assembly of my county who are leading very miserable lives. Some of them came around into the offices of the executive looking for work and looking for support. I have happened to have been lucky to serve in the second term as a CEC too. And so we were able to see these honorable members move from one office to the other looking for survival. And Honorable Speaker, that was expected and is expected because they have basic needs to make. And so I congratulate the majority leader for this wise move, that as senators, we would be able to establish a scheme that would be able to take care of our honorable members. And Honorable Speaker, I've seen in the past, even members some members of the Senate get to be members of the county assembly. And we need, as leaders, to really have a vision on how a number of us are going to survive the next day when they are out of their work. Honorable Speaker, the other reason why I support this bill is that the salaries of the members of the county assemblies are already very low against the expectations that are laid out for them. We have mentioned here, Honorable Speaker, that a review was done by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, which placed the speakers of county assembly at a higher level than even the members of the county assembly. Of course, that is laudable. But remember, Honorable Speaker, that the Speaker has no mandate with the public, but the members of the county assemblies solve the daily issues of our people down on the ground at the wards. So already the members of the county assembly have low benefits, they have low salaries. I remember their even car and mortgage is already low. So, Honorable Speaker, we must ensure that a saving is inculcated in the county assemblies where they would be able to save some money that will cushion them when finally they leave or they retire from their county assemblies or when they lose their seats, Honorable Speaker. I also have a reason to support this bill because of this bill spells out the establishment of a board of trustees. And it is so much in details who the bill states will form the members of the board of trustees. It is so elaborate, Honorable Speaker. But Honorable Speaker, whoever becomes a member of that board may not matter so much because they will be taking care of the interests of the county assembly. For me, Honorable Speaker, I want to stress on the fact that this board must be guided by what is spelled out in Chapter 6 of the Constitution of this Republic. That Chapter 6 talks about leadership and integrity. It talks about honesty, talks about accountability, talks about the values that are enshrined in our Constitution. Honorable Speaker, why this would be important? Why this would be important, Honorable Speaker, is that there would be values that are expected from us as spelled out in Chapter 6. The Board of Trustees will be dealing with monies that the county assembly members shall have voluntarily saved over the years. Honorable Speaker, it is very painful that somebody will have, an officer will have saved money from their salary. And when this is saved, Honorable Speaker, somebody who manages this money mismanages it and finally it does not benefit the members of the county assembly. I say this because there have been similar practices in other professions. I'm a teacher by profession, and I remember my father, who was also a teacher, was saving in a pension for the teachers of the then Greater Southern Nyanza. And I remember an investment was made that they built a very expensive house in Homa Bay called Sonyanko Plaza. But at some point, because of mismanagement, Honorable Speaker, teachers were suffering with their children leaving school, and yet teachers had saved for this pension scheme. So, Honorable Speaker, I would like the issue of integrity to be emphasized. And finally, Honorable Speaker, access to their contributions when they retire from the county assemblies must be made easier, so that the reason for their benefit, for their saving the reason for their saving and value for money is met by the families. Honorable Speaker, lastly, I want to caution that whoever will be managing these funds, let there be prudent management, Honorable Speaker. The Board of Trustees should not be too ambitious to overinvest in some of these funds, because finally, that also has hurt other schemes. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill, and I want to say that may the members of the County Assembly, once this bill is passed, invest more in this scheme, and by investing in this scheme, the honorable members of their county assemblies will be investing in their future and will be investing in the future of their children. Honorable Speaker, I support.
Senator Beatrice, you're doing very well until Senator Eddie gestured to. I hope that disruption did not take away the contributions you decided to conclude on your contribution. Senator James Murango.
Asante sana Mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, kwanza ningetaka kushukuru kiongozi wa wengi kwa sababu ya wazo nzuri ambayo wameleta na kuleta mswada ambao ni wa maana sana. Mstahiki Spika, katika maisha yangu ya awali nimekuwa mwakilishi wa wandi ambaye pia nikawa kiongozi wa wengi katika gatuzi la Kirinyaga. Na kwa hivyo najua fika masaimbu inaowafikia ama inaowafika mwakilishi wandi kwa kimombo MCAs ambayo ni mengi mno. Mstahiki Spika, kama kuna viongozi ambao wanachukuliwa kwa urahisi, kama kuna viongozi ambao mashinani wako na watu kila siku, kama kuna viongozi wanaombeba mizigo, kama kuna viongozi ambao wanafaa wasaidiwe, ni wakilishi wandi ambao ni MCA. Mstahiki Spika, mimi nilihudumu kwa kipindi cha miaka 5 kuanzia mwaka wa 2017 mpaka mwaka 2022. Na katika kile kipindi nilikuja bando, nilikuwa na marafiki wengi, kulikuwa wakilishi wandi kutoka Tebere na wengine ambao walikuweko. Tunapoongea sahihi, kuna wakilishi wandi wawili ambao moja ni wakilishi wandi wa Baragu anaitwa David Madhenge, kijana mtanashati, na kuna mwingine ambaye anaitwa Kawanguja ambaye ametoka Mutira. Wale ni mmoja wapo wa wale wakilishi wandi ambao sahihi wako katika muhula watatu. Ikusema kwamba unapomalizia watakuwa wamefanya ama wamehudumia wananchi kwa miaka 15. Lakini uchungu, Mstahiki Spika, ni kwamba baada hiyo kazi ngumu, hiyo kazi msaragambo, kazi ngumu sana ya kuhudumia wananchi, wale viongozi wataenda nyumbani mikono tupu bila kuwa wamewekeza ama wameweka pesa zozote katika idara yoyote ya kuhakikisha kwamba watapata fedha ya uzeeni. Mstahiki Spika, hakuna kitu kimbaya kama mtu ambaye wamehudumia wa Kenya, mtu amefanya kazi na anapoenda nyumbani anaenda mikono mitupu, na Mswahili anasema mikono mikavu ya hailambwi. Mstahiki Spika, baadhi ya wale walikuwa wanaitwa madiwani councillors ambapo wako Kirinyaga mpaka siku ya leo, unajua vizuri kuna mswada ulipitishwa katika hii bunge ambao ilisema kwamba walipo pesa zao za uzeeni, wengi washaga dunia na shinda nyingi za kimwili afya, hawakuweza hata kujikimu katika kujitunza wao wenyewe kwa sababu pesa yao ya uzeeni haikulipwa. Na ndio hata kama tunasukuma hiyo kufanyika, leo hii inasimama hapa niseme ya kwamba wazo kama hili ni nzuri sana kuhakikisha kwamba viongozi wetu baada ya kustaafu ama kuondokea kipindi chao cha huduma kwa wananchi hawapitii shida ambazo wengi wanapitia. Mstahiki Spika,
Leo hii mimi kama seneta ninafanya kipindi cha miaka 5. Kama nitaamua kurudi katika mbunge hili, nitakuwa nimefanya miaka 10. Hiyo ni kusema nitakuwa na pesa ya uzeeni miaka yote yangu ambayo nitakayoishi. Lakini katika ile pesa ambayo nawekeza ama ninayokata kutoka mshahara yangu, nikifanya kwa kipindi cha miaka 5, ile pesa nitapewa kama ile inaitwa kwa kimombo gratuity nikienda nyumbani. Mfumo kama ule wa kuwekeza pesa katika hii bondi ya kuhakikisha kwamba anapata pension na pesa ya uzeeni ni nzuri zaidi. Kumekuwa na masikitiko makubwa, tumekuwa tukichangia viongozi ambao wamekuwa wakilishi wadi, na mwingine hata alikuwa ameajiriwa kama mfanyikazi wa nyumba, na alikuwa mheshimiwa kiongozi ambaye alikuwa amehudumia wananchi. Mstahiki Speaker, uzuri wa mswada ulio mbele yetu, nimeona katika kuundwa kwa bodi ambayo itaangalia maslahi ya pesa uzeeni, kwamba watakaowekwa katika ile bondi wengi watakuwa ni wakilishi wadi, ili waweze kufanya uamuzi ambao utakuwa unafaidisha wale wakilishi wadi. Na kwa hivyo ningesema ya kwamba ni nadra sana kupata mtu ambaye amewania kiti ya useneta asipopata kwenda kuitisha kiti ya mwakilishi wadi. Lakini ile mateso ambayo inapitia wale ambao wamemaliza hatamu yao ya uongozi itakuwa imetatuliwa na mswada ulio mbele yetu. Mstahiki Speaker, Mstahiki Speaker, sana sana zile ujumbe fupi tunapata kutoka kwa MCAs katika maeneo tofauti kutoka gatuzi zetu, wanatupa ujumbe muhimu, kwa sababu mwakilishi wadi anakaa kwa andi yake na anajuana na kila mtu. Sana sana kazi wanaofanya tunaweza ifananisha na kile ile ya machifu. Kukiwa na harambee ya ugonjwa, mwakilishi wadi ni wa kwanza kuitwa. Kukiwa kuna nyumba imechomeka, mwakilishi wadi ni wa kwanza kuitwa. Kukiwa na magonjwa ambayo inafaa kuchangiwa, wengi wanatumia hata magari zao kama ambulance. Lakini shida ya mwakilishi wadi, kwa sababu unajua hii tutaangalia maslahi yao kwa mambo ya pesa uzeeni, shida yake kubwa ni kwamba tunapoangalia hata hii maslahi ambayo tunaiangalia siku ya leo, pia ni vizuri tuangalie wakilishi wadi pia katika ile pesa ambayo wanafaa kupewa, ile ilikuwa inaitwa ward fund, itawafikia kivipi? Wengi wanaoishia kuwa maskini na walala hoi ni wale ambao wanakuanga wamejitolea pesa yao kujaribu kusaidia. Wanasaidia kwa nini? Na pesa kama ni afya tunatoa. Hii seneti hivi karibuni tutapitisha sheria ya kuhakikisha kwamba pesa zinaenda kwa sababu ya kuweka dawa katika hospitali zetu. Tutapitisha pesa ambazo zinafaa kutengeneza barabara. Tutapitisha pesa ambazo zinafaa kujenga zile shule za chekechea katika gatuzi zetu. Ni kwa sababu wale mawakilishi wadi ambao wako pale, ile matoleo ambayo wanatoa kila siku, ni kwa sababu huduma zinazopatikana kwa county nyingine hazijatosha kuhakikisha kwamba wale wakilishi wadi pia hawaitishwi pesa na kuitwa mikutano, kwa sababu wale watakuwa huduma zote zitakuwa zinapeanwa. Kwa hivyo mimi naunga mkono Mstahiki Speaker, na niseme ya kwamba ningetaka kuambia wakilishi wadi wote MCA katika nchi hii kwamba sisi kama seneti tunawajali. Hii ni dalili ya kwamba tunawajali na tutaendelea kuwajali, na wao waende kuchunga rasilimali katika kaunti zetu, kusiwe na wizi na huduma sifikie wananchi. Na hiyo ndio njia ambayo tutahakikisha kwamba fedha tunazopitisha katika hii seneti zinafika kwa mwananchi na yaweze kusherekea. Kwa hiyo mengi na machache, mimi Mstahiki Speaker naunga mkono kwamba tuwe na bodi maalum ya kushughulikia pesa uzeeni ambazo MCA watakuwa wananufaika nazo. Asante sana Mstahiki Speaker.
Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m. Time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Thursday, 21st of November, 2024 at 2:30 p.m. in the National Assembly chambers.